Where are we? We are in week 3. So hopefully this is what you're expecting today. We're going to talk about Viva Engage and really from a business value feature functionality perspective. And then next week, or last week, will actually be the technical enablement, configuration, administration, all of the kind of configuration points of getting Viva Engage up and running, as well as adopted by your organization. So I shared these in the first week. We're going to go through them fast because we have a lot of content to get through. But you can kind of see these are the 4 mission statements of the different organizations listed there. So with those in mind, I kind of drafted a mission statement for these 4 weeks. So our goal here is really help you accelerate the journey. So basically, we just want to help you get Viva Connections, Viva Engage up and running more quickly. So answering your questions, helping you plan, getting you technical assistance where required, and also giving you any support you need for driving adoption. And if you have any better ways to say this, absolutely feel free to share those in the chat or in the Modern Work Superheroes community as well. So this is just kind of a very basic cycle of this journey. What I need to do is add kind of a reiteration cycle for it. But basically, many of you may be like in learning or planning, some of you may be further along, but basically, like we're hoping that at least some of you are in the learning phase and that's why you're here. And then as you move forward, we hope that you consider doing a proof of concept with like maybe a smaller set of employees to kind of get feedback, figure out the technology. It's not super difficult, but just kind of get your hands dirty, do some real implementation, see what's working, see what's not working. And then actually, like I say, build, develop. It doesn't always mean writing code. Sometimes build and develop is just doing configuration and configuring different settings. And then obviously adoption is where you're going to spend the bulk of your life cycle. The only thing that I would add there is that you then go back and you add new features, new capabilities, maybe you do things a little differently. So you don't have to enable every single feature to start off with, and you don't have to drive adoption of every feature. Obviously, you want to kind of start with a reasonable amount of change for your organization. We have a lot of tools that we throw to our employees, so kind of doing that in a managed fashion is really good. You do not need to remember the slide, but basically we are here in Customer Hub, and you can see if you need to learn more, if you need to invite other people to the party, we have executive briefings. We have our Microsoft Technology Centers that will host workshops for you, discussions. We also have workshops from our architects and engineers. We have deployment assistants, your customer success manager, probably the person who invited you here. They're your go-to person for help driving adoption. We have internal programs, we have partners, and then also if you're blocked, like if there's a technical blocker, if there's a feature we don't have, if you have a problem with like, maybe collaborating across organizations, whatever that is, like we can help you there as well. So this is all just to say, we're not going to say good luck with all that. Next week, we're going to make sure that we get you additional support to move forward. So with that, we will talk some Viva Engage. So just kind of a refresher, this is kind of our general intro to employee experience, Microsoft Viva. We have a lot of challenges in the workplace today, partially thanks to the pandemic, but just times change, patterns, trends change. So we had like a year or two of almost entirely remote working for those of us that were not considered, like the frontline workers or essential workers, they were sometimes called. And so now that office workers are going back in the office, you have different corporate opinions on whether they want people there all the time or maybe 3 days a week with that hybrid equation. You have people really that got used to working from home that are maybe less willing to make a commute 5 days a week. So there's lots of challenges. But connection is the thing we all want. Like if we're going to go to the office, we want to make sure we're seeing the people that we work with and maybe, having conversations that aren't going to lend themselves as well to, technology. You don't run into people at the coffee shop. You don't have lunch with them. So you have to make sure that, that in-person time is super valuable. Insight. So we have 75% of employees and 80% of managers think there's not enough feedback solicited. So we're not asking for feedback as often as we should as organizations. Purpose. Purpose is a huge problem. So it's important to prioritize your workload. Many of us, as coming out of the pandemic, we're doing more than we were going into the pandemic. And people realized if there wasn't commute time, maybe they had extra time to do work. And so to use a saying that I used to tell people probably 20 years ago, you cannot have more than one number one priority, right? Like everybody says these three things are equally important. I say, no, one of them has to be the most important. So like having a manager help you understand what's important, help you prioritize your workload, also super valuable. And then last, always a hot topic, learning and development. Most of us, we stay, if our companies invest in our learning and development. You have some people that wrongly think that if I give somebody training and then they go get a certification or a degree or whatever, they're going to go somewhere else for more money. But honestly, most of us appreciate the fact that our company is investing us and it makes us more loyal. So growth, also an important pillar of employee experience. So this is our employee experience platform. Hopefully not the first time you're seeing this slide, but for today's this workshop, these 4 weeks, we're focusing on culture and communications. But if you look across all of the areas, that is essentially what Microsoft Viva is meant to cover. And so you can see the different areas of like learning and our goals and topics and all of the different Viva apps that we have. But for our purposes, we're focused on culture and communications for this session. Once again, you'll probably, if you come back for another event, you'll hear us call these pillars. So we call this the connection pillar. So you notice that connections is not in here. It's really meant to be that entryway to all of the Viva suite, all of the Viva apps. And so as Viva Amplify becomes a released product and fully available, we'll add Viva Amplify to this session. And then Viva Engage, obviously important part of connection. All right, so let's get started with Viva Engage because that's why you're all here. So originally, when it was just Yammer, Yammer was all about communities, right? Like that was the big thing. We had Yammer, we had live events, and it was very focused on that community sense. But it was missing a couple of things. And so you can see giving employees a place to connect and express themselves. So absolutely encourage open sharing and contribution, also great. But that was all from a community perspective. So you couldn't post anything that was necessarily yours. And it also wasn't really focused around having leadership have that place to kind of put their communications out in a more meaningful way. So what we've seen as we've evolved, Yammer and now into Viva Engage, we now have features that address I want to share my thoughts and opinions and experiences as a person. So we have stories and storyline, and then we have leadership capabilities to let leaders connect in a more meaningful way to employees. And by more meaningful, I mean better than sending an email to all. That's not necessarily the best way to get people to read your message. So we'll not read the slides, hoping no death by PowerPoint today. But really you can see a different set of scenarios around communications, leadership, human resources, marketing, IT, and sales. So really about, connecting people, building those communities. So, I'm in Viva Engage every day. Sometimes it's looking for answers. Sometimes it's answering questions that somebody else may have. And sometimes it's just following up with what's being talked about in the communities I'm a member of. And then sometimes, which is usually Friday, it's just random reading Friday, which means I go out and I look at the all company feed just to see what people are talking about. So it's a really good way to kind of stay aware of what's going on in your org. Microsoft is a large place. So sometimes you find out things that are relevant to your job that are not posted anywhere you are. And then you can join that new community. So in addition to our communities, giving employees a voice and empower leaders to listen, learn, and engage, I think engaging is probably the important part, hence why it ended up in our product name. And, just sharing experiences and perspectives. If we talk about, communication tools that we've had over the years, like when you send an email, it's a one-way communication. You can now react, so that's good. When you post SharePoint news, it's generally a one-way communication. You can't allow commenting, but Viva Engage, formerly Yammer, is really that place where you have conversations. So you're having that two-way interaction where people feel heard and you're actually able to get perspectives of the broader part of the organization. So for employee relationships, best practices, communities for employee resource groups, we have many, we call them ERGs at Microsoft. Very diverse all across the board. And so it's basically a place for people to connect with others that have, similar concerns, similar interests, or similar life experiences. You can follow employees and leaders with common issues, goals, or interests. So I can follow my colleagues, I can follow leaders in my organization to make sure that I'm staying up to date with what they're doing. And then the last part is really the questions and answers. One of the biggest things I've always gotten from the communities, regardless of the technology, is when you work in tech, you tend to have a lot of questions, and you don't want to be like the most knowledgeable person in your team, because that means you're up till 2 o'clock in the morning. So being able to go out there and ask a question, get it answered within like 10, 15 minutes is one of the reasons, honestly, one of the reasons I work at Microsoft. I've worked with Microsoft Technologies for almost 30 years. And there's nowhere else that I can ask a question and get like a good, not just a good response, but an accurate response, and probably like 10 or 20 of them. And so not plugging for people to come apply to Microsoft unless you already wanted to, but like getting your questions answered is like one of the most valuable things a company can do, because it means that people are not independently solving the same problem and wasting time. So you get all of those best practices together and people can find them easily. So connecting. So once again, we talked about it, just asking questions, trading ideas, sharing news posts, what's going on, what's our latest, product release. Last Monday was a big day for Viva Engage. We announced a lot of new features being released, and getting everybody's opinions, including, the outside world. Asking questions, marking the best answers. Once again, I honestly feel that this has got to be in the top 3 best uses of Viva Engage, because then people can find that answer super quickly. Sharing files, photos, and videos. Super important is that we all get like walls of text every day. So anytime you add photos, you add videos, you're going to increase the likelihood of people reading your content. And then also, different generations have different preferences on these things. And so you're going to make sure that by having a combination of both, you get your content out to everyone. And I think we are good there. Sorry, we have a lot of slides and we're already 17 minutes in. So sharing information. One of the best things you can use Viva Engage for is announcements. This is a corporate culture as far as tools go. So it's super important, to have that one place that people go. So if you make a habit of putting certain types of announcements and communications in Viva Engage, then people will actually look there first, right? So they're not going to go search for an email. They're not going to go, search your intranet. They shouldn't have to search, right? So if you make that the place they go for information, then they're going to get the notifications, they're going to see them, and it just reduces frustration. And you can see that from our metrics, the time to reach people is 4.5 times faster via Viva Engage than email. Likely because we're all still drowning in email. Everybody always says email is going to die, but sadly it does not. We have new tools, but we still use email. So one of the ways you can get some of that content out of email is to use tools like Viva Engage to make it easier for your employees to access. So modernizing communications, having polls, questions, praise, using graphics, like all of that helps, add a little bit of lighthearted things, recognizing people with praise. It all just makes it a better experience instead of just like, here's the things you need to know today. Probably not telling you anything you don't know. Interactive messages. So the nice thing is that Viva Engage goes across all of our modern work. So it'll integrate with Outlook, Teams, SharePoint. We've got mobile apps. So it's everywhere. So when we say Viva Engage, we don't just mean the Teams app. So if you read last Monday's announcement or saw that, the desktop, web, and mobile experiences of Yammer will be branded Viva Engage, so people can access that content from wherever they're working. Feature conversations. So if you feature a conversation, it gets up to 10 times the engagement. So if you have something that's super important for people to see, there's ways to boost that prominence. And then last, obviously, many of you are probably into numbers. And it's really important to understand the impact of your content. And we'll talk about the analytics a little bit later. But being able to understand like what's working, what are people reading, what are people not reading, that's always been kind of one of the core things of, modern communications is it's great that I'm sending something, but how well is it being acknowledged? So I'm looking at a question here, tips and tricks for conservative organization. Oh, all right. Let me address that at the end. Very good question. Have been there before. Um, so please, I will return to that. But it's a very good question. So for a little class participation, since I'm feeling very isolated and alone today here on camera, if you'll do me a favor and use the React button, if you will raise your hand if you have heard of and or used Storyline in Viva Engage yet. Oh, I'm seeing a couple. Awesome. So for anybody who's using other types of social media tools, I think probably your Facebook timeline is the most common. So this is what Viva Engage now offers via Storyline and Stories. So you're able to share content, including videos, and stories are basically those videos, and your storyline is kind of your feed, your page, your personal page of content. And so you're now able to post things as yourself. So instead of posting to a community, which is all we could do previously, you can now post content to your page so that if people follow you, they can actually see what you're posting on your page instead of having to just go search and see, through the search results. So it now kind of brings that individual experience to Viva Engage, which I think has been a long time coming and gives people an opportunity to have a personal brand, and you'll also see what they're interested in. Do we have a question, or was it just a hand raised when I was asking for the participation? All right. Let me know if there's a question. As mentioned, basically, Storyline is your place to share your own thoughts and experiences. They'll be in your feeds. So there's an algorithm, obviously, that determines what you're looking at. So you'll see people that you're following, leaders that you're following, as well as some other suggested content. And it's a way to connect and build your personal network. So you can follow people just like you would do on other social media platforms in the consumer space. As I mentioned, stories are the video aspect of Storyline. So we all know that oftentimes videos can be more engaging than just reading a text post from someone. Text good. Text with photos better, video is really good. So not appropriate for every sort of type of content, right? But, sharing your thoughts of the day. We have one of our senior executives in the modern workspace. He has his 5-minute Friday. So every Friday he posts 5 minutes. Although I don't think it's on stories because I don't think story supports that much, but post it to his Storyline so that we can actually know what's going on in modern work in Microsoft. So things across Teams and SharePoint and Viva Engage. And so it's really helpful as somebody who doesn't work as part of that team to kind of know what they're focused on from the engineering perspective. So you can kind of see here the different use cases. I think I've talked about most of these, but it's really just, once again, a way, to have your own personal brand, your own personal voice. And then follow people that you share things in common with, and you might learn things that you wouldn't have discovered otherwise. And so these are just some more suggestions about the Storyline capability. Answers in Viva. All right, so if I talk about the top 3, as I mentioned before, the Q&A is super important. The larger your organization gets, the more distributed you are, the harder it is to make sure that everybody kind of knows the best practices or best ways of doing things within your company, and that they're not out there asking the question that somebody maybe halfway around the world knows the answer to, but because those people aren't connected, they're trying to solve those problems individually. So you can ask the questions, you can mark something as a best answer so that it actually is acknowledges the right answer. You can upvote responses, so you can actually upvote and downvote similar. I don't think you can downvote, but you can upvote like you would do on Reddit. And Margo, let me know if you can downvote. I'm not sure about that. I've never downvoted anybody. You can assign experts to make sure that questions get put in the right place. Search through the questions, and then using topics to see similar related questions to gather that context. So community members with the best reply are 2 times as likely to answer a question the following month. And so basically you're kind of rewarded for providing good answers, because then you feel like your contributions are valued. So it's not just good for the people asking the questions, it's good for the people that are answering them, because they feel like their time has been valued. So if you find an answer in Viva Engage, please give it a like. make sure you upvote it so that that person knows that you appreciate their effort. Just trying to keep up with the chat. Okay, so I'm going to answer the question in the chat. So is there crossover between Yammer and Viva Engage? So this was our marketing challenge, which has been corrected. It will take a little bit longer to get to all the products. So Margot says Yammer is Viva Engage. So when you look at Viva Engage, it's an app in Teams. However, it is running on all of the Yammer services. So it's just basically like a Teams app for Yammer. And it was previously like the Yammer Communities app in Teams. So it just got rebranded Viva Engage. But all of the underlying services is exactly the same. It's the same application. So the conversations you would see in your feed in the front end of Viva Engage in Teams is exactly the same feed that you would see whether you were in mobile, whether you were in web, or the desktop application for Yammer. Fortunately, we will be eliminating the Yammer name over the upcoming months. And so eventually everything will be called Viva Engage, and it will eliminate that confusion. Sorry for the long answer, but it's been a big question with many of our customers. And thanks, Margot, for tending to those questions in the chat. So if you're currently using Viva Topics, or you have the Viva Suite, or if also you're considering it, answers in Viva works with Viva Topics. And so in addition to the questions that you're asking here, you can see like the answers heading at the top. So you have communities, storyline, and then answers to the right. And I think what we're missing on the header, I can actually show you where Microsoft Viva Engage, but there's also like a leaders section as well. But if you're in the answers section, which is where you would go to get answers, basically ask your questions and find the answers, it's integrated with Viva Topics. So with Viva Topics, you're actually getting additional content, essentially like your knowledge management. And so every question and answers requires a topic. So there's very tight integration between the answers in Viva that's present in Viva Engage, and then Viva Topics, which is another one of our Viva apps. So basically, you post your question, include details like, I'm sure many of you probably share this pain, but oftentimes people ask questions and don't give you enough detail to provide a meaningful answer. So more detail, good. There's related questions when you add a Viva topic. So it's a whole issue of making sure you don't have duplication. And then you have the discover new topics, so that if there is, if you've been looking at a question around a certain topic, it's going to be like, you might also be interested in sort of functionality. And you can see those on the right side of the Viva Engage app. All right, moving forward. So one of the other newer features, and these became general availability, so released last Monday, or a lot of our leadership features. Sorry, I can't talk this morning for some reason. Essentially, this gives a place for leaders to post on their storyline, share their own stories. You can host AMAs. And so like the AMAs are just like you would see in other technology and other forums out in the world. So basically they have this period of time where employees can come in and ask questions, and the leader will sit there and answer the questions. Organizers can also kind of like monitor those questions and kind of prioritize the ones that get answered. So it's really a good way for leadership to connect with employees, especially, as I mentioned, the larger your organization gets, the harder it is for senior leadership to stay kind of in touch with what, the core of the worker, the employee base is thinking. So it gives them that place to do it. That is not, maybe once a quarter, once a year kind of town hall. It's more than just sending out emails or posting a SharePoint update. So it's, they can share a video on their, stories on their storyline. They can host AMAs, and it just makes it a little bit more personal and human, so that, it's great as employees to kind of know what's on your leaders' minds, instead of just making, like, when you don't say what's on your mind, people make assumptions. And I think, honestly, this entire talk can be, labeled how to communicate better in your company so that we all have better working relationships. So you can see here, this is a leader storyline. They can do the same thing as the community. They can make announcements. I believe the delegate posting is a premium feature. Actually, all of the leadership is a premium feature, but basically you have the ability to delegate, somebody to post on your behalf. So oftentimes senior leaders will have people that will manage their content and post it on their behalf. And so you have that ability as well. And then at a glance, and somebody spelled glance on my slide deck wrong. All right, this is embarrassing. Anyway, I will fix that after today. But at a glance, advanced analytics to understand reach and impact. So once again, understanding who's reading and like what's the scope of that engagement. So made the little note here, all Yammer apps are being rebranded to Viva Engage. It's going to take a little time. Margo, maybe you can answer Diane's question. So I hope I didn't speak wrong, but it's my understanding that delegation is specifically delegation for the leadership corner features is what requires the premium license. I don't like talking licensing. I'm definitely not knowledgeable enough in that space, but I do believe that all of the leadership capabilities are through the premium license, but I will clarify when we get to the end of this.
Yeah, we're going to talk about licensing in the end. I believe we do have a whole slide with the comparison,
okay.
But yeah, the storyline bit, the leaders have the storyline just as any normal user.
Yeah.
The leadership corner, yes, that would be a premium license. But yeah, we can talk licensing towards the end.
Licensing. I guess I need to invite like some salesperson. I need to invite somebody from the sales side to these customer hub events if we're going to talk premium capabilities. All right, so you can see here, and it's funny because like it says leader activity here. It is a little out of date. They're now called leader stories, but you'll actually see like the leaders that you follow, and then you'll also see some that are suggested. But you'll see all of their postings when you click on the leader section of Viva Engage. And so I think this is basically covering most of what we talked about, and we'll get to analytics in a moment here. You can also assign audiences based on teams, departments, or custom criteria. So that's one of the nice things is you can, target the scope of your audience. I feel like I've talked about all of this. So it is generally available as of last Monday. It is rolling out or is out. So, for leaders sharing regular updates, I mean, once again, probably not any surprising information for anyone here, but it's super important to have regular updates. And it doesn't have to be daily, like weekly, bi-weekly is probably fine, but having that regular cadence of content makes people look forward to hearing your updates and, kind of keeping things fresh for the employees. Every leader is going to have a different cadence based upon, their audience and their role. Aligning the organizations by responding to questions. So having those AMAs you can see at the bottom, and then, hosting town halls in the CEO connection community. Once again, just kind of getting your message out there, helping employees understand, what the core motions are, what the core initiatives are. Once again, I feel like all of this could be labeled having good communication, right? Like removing ambiguity, providing clarity, helping people get their questions answered, connecting them to others so they can, take advantage of best practices and like kind of your tribal knowledge that you have as a company. That is what we're going for. And so you can see it here. We have the leadership corner. We have our highlighted leaders. You can see that there's an AMA going on for diversity and inclusion. You can see that there's a campaign in progress. So like for Microsoft, we have our Microsoft Gift campaign in October. Everybody's going to have different things during the year. So just super easy way to stay in touch with all of the leader activities. And then you can see at a glance like who you're following. And then you can see additional leaders. So everybody that's tagged as a leader, then you can actually go add additional ones to the ones that you're following. Social campaigns. So campaigns are really helpful when you're trying to promote certain activities, business goals, and objectives. So you've got hashtags, you've got a goal tracker. So like I said, for like our October Microsoft Gift campaign that we do annually, that would be a great way to say, like, you know, for our modern work customer success organization, we have a goal of, like, generally we have a goal for like dollars donated and hours volunteered. And so it'll be exciting this year because it'll be the first year we can do this. We can use Viva Engage to do that. And so you can have hashtags that let people share what they're doing, where they're volunteering, all the good things that are going on, and then actually, you know, keeping track of it and being able to see that, you know, close to real time. That's going to be super exciting. And then, you know, at the end, you have top creators and top conversations. So when you go to do your event wrap up, you can actually share the top content from that event. And you can see, like, here's the campaign that the person's in. It's the above and beyond campaign, and it, you know, shares what the campaign is, where they are, they're 50% there. You've got pinned content, teams backgrounds, intro videos. So once again, just another way to kind of bring people together around a cause. So virtual events and town halls. So we've got virtual events with up to 20,000 attendees. You can see the details here, but, you know, once again, getting that real-time insight as far as, you know, who's attending, who's engaged, the questions that are being asked and answered, really helpful. AMAs, so they're like your text experience. If you've ever done like a Reddit AMA, but basically people have this window of time that they're answering questions, and you just come ask your question. You can moderate the questions, you can promote them as an organizer, can moderate them to make sure that people aren't asking questions they shouldn't be, because that probably happens from time to time. And then get the event analytics. So really helpful way to have kind of a casual place to ask and answer questions, and probably a little bit less managed and, you know, stressful as doing like live employee events. So like there's a place for every type of event, and this is like a really good way to have kind of that casual Q&A session. We actually have one coming up, I think, on Thursday, and if I find it, I'll post a link here. I believe there is a Viva AMA, and I don't know if it's Viva Engage. I think it is, but I had a 3-day weekend, and my brain is still, we had President's Day here in the US, and my brain is still not 100% engaged. So you can see here, you have all of the leadership AMAs that are available. So this company is apparently planning lots of them. And you can see that there's bi-weekly ones for the leadership team. So it's a great way to kind of find out all the upcoming events in your company. And so maybe certain people or certain groups host one on a regular basis, so you know that you can always go get your questions answered. Analytics. So as we all know, we all like our numbers. I know we like our numbers at Microsoft. Everybody's got dashboards with red, yellows, and greens. But here, it's much more about understanding the engagement. So it's called Viva Engage for a reason. We want to engage across the organization with each other, between leaders and employees, and between employees and employees. So being able to understand, like, what's your reach of your posts, what kind of replies, and actually not just tell you the people that reply, but also who you've replied to, how many followers, who's viewing your post, and then the percentage of followers engaging. So we actually have this metric in Viva Connections and kind of like the SharePoint space as well. And it's one of those things of like, okay, it's great that you posted something, and it's great that people liked it, but what is this engaged usage? And engaged usage means like people are having interactive conversations instead of just like clicking a button. So the things that are generating conversation, those are probably topics that are important to the organization. Also seeing information specific to your team. You can measure sentiment. I believe this is done with Azure Cloud Services. So it'll actually, you can see trending positive there in the middle for sentiment in your audience. So you can actually kind of keep a pulse on what people think about different topics that are being talked about within Viva Engage. And you can, you know, filter that. And so if you saw a particular topic taking a nosedive and going into a very negative sentiment, like maybe that's something, and likely is something, that senior leadership would want to address instead of watching it continue to go in a negative direction. And so you can see here, it's done with machine learning. And so basically understanding how people feel about that theme, what they're saying, what they're thinking. And then maybe you go participate in some of those conversations, maybe host an AMA. But obviously the worst thing to do is like know that there's a problem and do nothing about it. So step one of that is knowing that there's a problem. So this is one way to know that there's a problem. And we'll get to your amplified questions momentarily. We're almost done. I'm excited. So this is your campaign analytics. So we talked a few slides ago about the campaigns. So you can actually, have these events, whether they're, philanthropic or your charity campaigns where you're raising money, but could be anything, related to your business as well. So this is where you would basically see, how many people were reached, how many followers, people who reacted, replied, posted. You can see at the bottom the top conversations, and that's, it's a lot of information to help you understand what's effective and what's not. So we have a lot of tools, even just within Microsoft, for communications. So obviously understanding what is working and what is not is super important. The worst thing we can do is just like spam our employees and via every tool to say like, well, that way I know they read it. So one of the things here is like understanding like what's working, what's not, and then you tune and adjust. So we're never really done in the technology space and modern work, because it's always about what's working, what's not working, and let's make it better. And those analytics will let you do that. So I guess I need to update this slide as well. I updated a few of the slides, but I missed this one. So Yammer, being the standalone app, will actually be the Viva Engage app as well. So Viva Engage will become the new name of Yammer. So Yammer will eventually cease to be a name for our application. So that's super exciting. It'll all be called Viva Engage, one name. I think this is pretty much, you can get to Viva Engage pretty much from anywhere. So it's your Viva Connections feed will have your Viva Engage content in it. You have Viva Topics cards and pages will highlight conversations and Q&A from Viva Engage. There is a Viva Engage app in Outlook. If you've ever looked at your SharePoint, if you're a page editor in SharePoint, you've probably seen that there's like a Yammer web part, soon hopefully to be Viva Engage web part. And then you've got Microsoft Teams and the Yammer mobile app experience as well. So there's a lot of ways to surface your content from Viva Engage across Microsoft 365. So you're not limited to just the app that you see in Teams. It has some very unique and specific capabilities, but you also have a lot of capabilities in other Microsoft services as well. Licensing. I don't like licensing. That's why I got out of sales. It's more fun on the side. We work on the adoption usage side of Microsoft, which is more fun. But this is licensing. So basically shows you what's available to Viva Suite customers. And so those are the leadership premium capabilities that I mentioned earlier in today's conversation. And you can see the answers, the Viva Topics integration, and some of the enhanced storyline capabilities. And this is a link to our Viva Engage adoption resources. As I mentioned, that's Margot and I, we work in customer success. So we're all about helping you use the technology that you purchased from us. So that's why we're all here. If you do need help, I had a big slide with lots of options, but just a reminder, if you or most of our larger enterprise customers like you have fast track benefits automatically, and that covers Viva Engage. And I will put a plug out for Margot's team as well, because they have many workshops delivered by our cloud solution architect engineers on Viva Engage as well. Team Margot and plug in for the workshops. And that is all I have.